Hello, welcome everybody. Student pilots, senior student pilots, new CPLs, transitioning military pilots, and senior airline pilots who are attending this course. Welcome to this module on TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System. A lot of you may already know what TCAS is. You've heard about TCAS before. That's a good thing. This module requires you to have a little bit of information on what a traffic collision avoidance system is. Perhaps if you've read a little bit about TCAS in the past, it would help. This module is meant for a wide array of pilots, student pilots, senior student pilots, pilots who are about to receive their CPLs, transitioning military pilots, and active airline pilots. So since it's meant for a wide array of pilots, I'll have to keep it basic and advanced at the same time. So I will try to explain to you what TCAS is, but I will not harp too much on the absolute basics. Remember, the idea behind conducting this airline orientation course is to blend what is given in the books to what is operationally done by airline pilots on the line. So my job is to teach you how a TCAS is utilized by operating line pilots on the line and how they use what is in the books and apply it to real world, commercial, or line flying. So let's take it from the top. This presentation, the title slide itself has a lot of information on screen. You see TCAS, you see ACAS, you see a bunch of text in red, you see something about an Uberlingen disaster, you see a bunch of graphics. Before I start, let me quickly show you the slides that we will be going through. There are about 29 slides, which include the title slides and a few questions and answers. Talking about the title slide itself has a lot of content on it. So let's discuss it one by one. TCAS and ACAS. What is the full form of TCAS? Traffic Collision Avoidance System. What is the full form of ACAS? It's an ICAO standard called Airborne Collision Avoidance System. There is a bit of text over here which is in red and bolded. It says TCAS 2 V7.1. That is TCAS 2 version 7.1. All of you attending this course, and I would suggest all commercial pilots everywhere in the world who are utilizing TCASs on their airplanes, must know that the most recent generation of TCAS that is being used in the world right now is TCAS 2. There used to be a TCAS 1 earlier. We will talk about the differences between TCAS 2 and TCAS 1 during this presentation. But the most recent generation of TCAS is TCAS 2. And the most recent software variant is version 7.1. Because this is in red, I want all of you to remember this by memory. Everybody enrolled in this course must remember this by memory, that the most recent TCAS generation is TCAS 2, and the most recent software variant is version 7.1. And you will see a line over here that states full replacement of TCAS 2 version 7.0, that was the previous software version, after the Uberlingen disaster. Guys, the Uberlingen disaster was a mid-air collision that happened in somewhere in Europe. We will talk about this accident during the briefing, and that prompted the software variant or software version to change from version 7.0 to version 7.1. We will talk about this sometime later in the briefing. And the target for this change was 2014, the year 2014. So guys, what is TCAS? It is a combination of hardware and software on your aircraft that gives you a certain number of indications on your screens. When I say indications, it gives you targets. When I say targets, I mean other traffic in your vicinity. TCAS is able to represent other traffic in your vicinity on your navigation displays to show you your proximity to this other traffic and to help you maintain safe distance from this traffic. In the event that TCAS senses a potential collision is about to happen, TCAS has the ability, TCAS 2 especially has the ability to tell both these aircrafts to take evasive action. Right? Simply put, it is a combination of software and hardware that is built into the avionics of your airplane, and that allows the avionics of your airplane to depict various targets around you. When I say targets, I mean traffic in your vicinity. And in the event that TCAS senses that a collision is going to happen, it has the ability to suggest evasive action to the aircraft in question. Right? So that is what TCAS is. We will talk about the technical. We will talk about what it is. We will talk about the indications, and then we will talk about some standard operating procedures at the end of this presentation, which I have noticed the books are not very good with. A good reason. The books are not good with suggesting standard operating procedures because it's difficult to suggest standard actions to pilots from different fleets operating different kind of aircraft. But as part of this presentation, we will try to standardize the actions as much as possible. So you would be helped once you get into the groove of commercial flying, get into your first airline type ratings. So let's go to the next slide. The objectives. What are we going to discuss today? Point number one, we will talk about when an aircraft begins to need a TCAS. Are all aircraft required to have TCASs? No. So let's talk about when an aircraft begins to need a TCAS. Point number two, what is the interdependence of TCAS on your transponder? They are very closely linked to each other. What is a transponder? A transponder is something that talks to secondary surveillance radar on the ground. It is a device on your aircraft that talks to secondary surveillance radar on the ground and tells secondary surveillance radar where you are in the world, who you are, right? There is an interdependence between your TCAS and your transponder, and we will discuss that. Point number three, most importantly, we will talk about the indications that TCAS gives you on your navigation display. We must understand the indications as commercial pilots. We must remember the indications as commercial pilots by heart. And point number four, we will talk about contingencies, my favorite part of this briefing. The contingencies are where we talk about standard operating procedures. How do we deal with a TCAS event when you're actually placed in a TCAS event? When would it be a bad idea to follow TCAS guidance? In what emergency or abnormality would you not follow TCAS guidance? So contingency is my favorite part, purely because I like talking about standard operating procedures. They are not very well documented in books for very, very obvious reasons. I don't blame the books. It is very difficult for a book to standardize operating procedures for TCAS across number of pilots operating different aircraft types, right? So let's jump right into it, guys. TCAS 2 and TCAS 1, what is the difference? Back in the day, the first generation of TCAS was called TCAS 1. The current generation of TCAS is called TCAS 2. TCAS 1 had the ability to give you something called traffic advisory only. Traffic advisory only, colloquially referred to as TA, Tango Alpha, traffic advisory. What does traffic advisory mean? It simply had the ability on your navigation display or some kind of a display somewhere where it could, I'm going to use the laser pointer. Let's say this is your aircraft. This depicts your aircraft. This is the area in front of your aircraft, and you can see a little solid yellow circle, which depicts another aircraft in your vicinity. TCAS 1 could only tell you that there is traffic in your vicinity. It could only alert you to traffic that is in your vicinity, that is close to you. But in the event that it sensed a collision is about to happen, aside from alerting you, TCAS 1 did not have the ability to suggest evasive maneuvers. Did not have the ability to suggest evasive maneuvers, which means if you continue to fly towards this aircraft and there was a extreme risk of collision, TCAS 1 couldn't do anything to help you. Cut to TCAS 2. TCAS 2 is the current generation of Traffic Collision Avoidance System, and TCAS 2 is capable of giving you traffic advisory, TA, and also RA, resolution advisory. Simple words, resolution advisory. It advises you on a resolution to the problem you find yourself in. So unlike TCAS 1, where TCAS 1 only alerted you to traffic in your vicinity, TCAS 2 will alert you to traffic in your vicinity. And if you don't do anything about it and keep getting closer to that traffic, and TCAS 2 senses that there is a risk of collision, it will be able to give you suggestions for evasive maneuvers. So it will be able to tell your aircraft and the other aircraft in question, suggest a way for both of you to avoid colliding with each other. We'll talk about how that resolution advisory is given in the next few slides. Is it mandatory for all aircraft to have TCASs? No, it is not. It only becomes mandatory when an aircraft is employed in commercial services, charging money, and has a passenger seating capacity of more than 30 seats. Guys, this is what the regulation states. The regulation states that an airplane that is employed in commercial activity and has a passenger seating capacity of more than 30 seats requires to have a TCAS on board. However, it must be stated that of late, as TCAS as hardware is becoming more and more available and more accessible, you do have smaller aircraft as well that are coming standard fitted with TCASs. I envisage a time where going forward, there will really be no aircraft in the world without a TCAS, as TCASs become more and more available and accessible as hardware. So this slide talks about more of a thumb rule. How do two airplanes with TCAS 2s take evasive action to avoid collision. Let's say you have two aircraft that find themselves in a situation exactly as you see on screen, where both these aircraft, one slightly above the other, are heading towards each other on a potential collision course. TCAS will ideally pick the aircraft on the top and ask the aircraft on the top to begin climbing as part of the resolution advisory. Remember, long before TCAS asks an aircraft to start taking evasive action, it would have already alerted the pilot that there is another aircraft in the vicinity. And generally, this alert is in the form of a visual alert and an oral alert. The visual alert will be in the form of some kind of a depiction on your TCAS screen, like the yellow solid circle or the red solid square. And also, there will be an oral advisory. And that oral advisory, everywhere in the world, every aircraft equipped with TCAS in the world is the same. The aircraft will speak traffic, traffic 2 times. It will speak the word traffic, traffic 2 times. So as soon as you hear the oral warning traffic, traffic, it is a cue for the pilots of the aircraft to look at their TCAS display or the navigation display where proximate traffic is being shown to them to try to figure out where the proximate traffic is. If no action is taken and the airplanes continue towards each other on a potential collision course, TCAS 2 will then generate something called an RA, a resolution advisory. The depiction of the solid yellow circle, I'm not going to talk about the complications or the details of indications yet. We will talk about it in the indication slide. But let's say the solid yellow circle will change into maybe a solid red square. And the airplane will now once again orally speak and warn you and give you an instruction. For example, climb, climb. At the same time, it will give the other aircraft an instruction, descend, descend, which will lead one aircraft to climb and the other aircraft to descend, which will automatically get them off the collision course that they were initially on. What is the moral of the story of this slide? TCAS will always separate two aircraft on a potential collision course with each other by giving them climb and descend instructions. TCAS 2 will never ask you to turn left or right to avoid another aircraft. The resolution advisory or the evasive maneuver is always given in the vertical plane, up and down, climb and descend and climb, level off and climb. It's always up, down, never left, right. Right? So if we are clear on that, we can proceed to the next slide. There are 4 bullet points on this slide, all 4 equally important. Let us say this is your aircraft. This aircraft over here is your aircraft. And let us say this is the intruder aircraft. For the purposes of our exercise today, this is the aircraft that is going to cause a traffic advisory and a resolution advisory. So let's say you are flying and TCAS senses that both of these aircraft are on a collision course with each other. Let's talk about these 4 points one by one. To start with, in red, we must, by memory, remember these frequencies. The frequencies that a TCAS employs are 1030 megahertz and 1090 megahertz. For all of you who have already studied CPL content, ATPL content, you would recognize these 2 frequencies as 2 frequencies being used by something else on your aircraft as well. I'll give you a moment to think about it. 11000, 21000, 31000. If you thought about the transponder, you are correct. These are the same frequencies that are being used by the transponder on your aircraft, which automatically means that the TCAS is working very closely with your transponder. Your transponder is capable of sending out signals, electromagnetic waves from your aircraft, giving ground stations your position and who you are and where you are. TCAS is sensing transponder signals from other aircraft in your vicinity. And based on the information it is getting from other aircraft in the vicinity versus your current location, figuring out what proximate traffic to you is in your vicinity, right? Now, There are three kinds of transponders, guys, in the world. There is a mode alpha transponder, a mode Charlie transponder, and a mode Sierra transponder. What is the difference between these three transponders? The mode alpha transponder is a very old kind of a transponder and is only capable of giving out or giving a ground station your bearing and your distance. That's all. It can only tell a ground station, I am on so and so bearing from you, 25 nautical miles away from you. A mode Charlie transponder makes this into three-dimensional information by being able to share altitude as well. So a mode Charlie transponder will give information about you, about your aircraft. The information that it gives a ground station is your bearing, your distance, but also your altitude, three-dimensional information. Mode Sierra is the most recent generation of transponders that are used on most modern airliners, ATR, 737s, Airbuses. A mode Sierra transponder is capable of giving a whole bunch of data. Let's put it this way. An easy way to understand what information a mode Sierra transponder gives ground stations is if you look at a Boeing 737 cockpit or an Airbus A320 cockpit or an ATR 72 cockpit, you will notice that all of the autopilots of this aircraft are controlled by a long glare shield which has a bunch of knobs, buttons, and numbers at about the eye level of the pilot, right? The glare shield. A mode Sierra transponder is potentially capable of giving a ground radar station all of the data that is entered on this glare shield or this mode control panel, depending on the aircraft that you are flying. So it is able to give the ground station your speed, your altitude, the vertical speed setting you have made, every single setting you have made to command your autopilot to do what it's doing. A mode Sierra transponder is potentially capable of sharing all of this information with a ground station. So a ground station not only receives your bearing and your distance and your altitude, but it also receives data that you have fed into your autopilot to tell the aircraft what to do next. That's what a mode Sierra transponder can do. Very, very advanced. So point number one and point number two on the slide are pertaining to your transponder. These are the two frequencies that your transponder employs. It is the same frequency that is used by the TCAS as well, which leads us to believe that a TCAS is very, very closely linked to your transponder. In fact, it is. A TCAS is sensing transponder signals coming from other aircraft in your vicinity to figure out what their position is with respect to yours or relative to yours. We've discussed the difference between mode Alpha Charlie and Sierra transponders as well. Now, conceptually, guys, your TCAS, let's say this is your aircraft, your TCAS is creating two imaginary protective bubbles around your aircraft. Two imaginary protective bubbles around your aircraft. One of these bubbles is, for the purposes of calling it a color, let's call it the yellow bubble. One of the bubbles, the yellow bubble, is your traffic advisory bubble. And the other bubble, being your red bubble, is a resolution advisory bubble. So it's fairly easy to assume that when an intruder aircraft gets into my traffic advisory bubble zone, my aircraft will give me a traffic advisory, which means my aircraft will speak traffic, traffic. And I, as the pilot of that aircraft, is responsible to look at the screen where I can see traffic proximate to me and figure out where that traffic advisory traffic is. And it is fairly easy to assume that if I continue to fly towards this aircraft and that aircraft flies into the intruder aircraft, flies into my resolution advisory bubble, my aircraft will now trigger a resolution advisory, prompting me to climb or descend or maintain some kind of vertical separation from this traffic. After having said this to you, this is where the books are a little lacking. After having said this to you, most of the pilots that I speak to about TCAS tend to think that the traffic advisory bubble and the resolution advisory bubble are distance related bubbles, which means there is a good chance that my airplane is creating an imaginary traffic advisory bubble within, let's say, 25 nautical miles of my aircraft. And there is a good chance the aircraft is creating a resolution advisory bubble within maybe 5 nautical miles of my aircraft. And it's fairly easy to assume that if an aircraft enters your 25 nautical mile bubble, you will get a traffic advisory. And if it enters your resolution advisory bubble, you will get a resolution advisory. While that may seem true, it is not. The fourth point on this slide states your bubbles are based on time to reach CPC. What does that mean? Time to reach closest point of contact. To understand this, let's go to the next slide. So it's now time to talk about how your aircraft's TCAS determines where the traffic advisory bubble and the resolution advisory bubble for your aircraft will lie. As we've already discussed, captains, the traffic advisory and the resolution advisory bubbles on your aircraft are not distance related, they are time related. As we saw in the last slide, based on time to reach CPC, or closest point of contact, right? So let's assume this is your aircraft, and let's assume this is an intruder aircraft. And your aircraft obviously has got a TA bubble around it and an RA bubble around it. I want you to pay close attention to the labeling of these bubbles. You will notice from your aircraft to the front of the traffic advisory bubble is labeled 3.3 nautical miles and 40 seconds. And the resolution advisory bubble from your aircraft to the front of the bubble is labeled 2.1 nautical miles and 25 seconds. Captains, I want you to remember that TCAS is very good at doing two things. TCAS is very good at number one, the formula distance equals speed times time, speed into time. And number two, trigonometry. Let's leave the trigonometry aside for the moment, and let's only talk about distance equals speed into time. TCAS is very quick in being able to figure out what your closure rate with another aircraft, or in this case, an intruder, is. You will notice the labeling of this imaginary green bubble states time criteria 300 knot closure rate. What this means is the speed of your intruder aircraft, let's assume, is 150 nautical miles per hour, and the speed of your aircraft, let's assume, is 150 nautical miles per hour. So both of your aircraft are flying towards each other at speeds of 150 nautical miles per hour, which makes your relative speed 300 nautical miles per hour. That's your closure rate, right? TCAS is very quick in figuring this out. And once it figures this out, TCAS places this 300 nautical mile per hour closure rate or relative speed into the speed portion of this formula, distance equals speed times time. What it does then is it takes the 40 seconds of the TA region and substitutes time for 40 seconds. Whatever answer it gets, it will place the traffic advisory bubble around your aircraft at that distance. The same goes for the resolution advisory bubble as well. It will take your closure rate of 300 nautical miles per hour and place it into speed, and it will take the 25 seconds of the resolution advisory bubble and place it into time and create a distance of 2.1 nautical miles. Whatever is the answer will be the distance at which your RA bubble will be placed. If you have understood this, if you have understood that your traffic advisory and your resolution advisory bubbles are not distance-related bubbles, they are time-related bubbles, you will then be able to quickly make the association that your airplane does not have just one TA bubble and one RA bubble around it. There are multiple TA and RA bubbles around your aircraft depending on the number of targets proximate to your aircraft. So if there are 10 aircraft proximate to your aircraft, there are 10 TA and 10 RA bubbles around your aircraft that your TCAS is constantly monitoring, which is why I said TCAS is amazing at number one, distance equals speed into time. It is able to very, very quickly compute distance equals speed into time for multiple targets around you, thereby placing multiple traffic advisory and resolution advisory bubbles around your aircraft. Remember, each traffic advisory and resolution advisory bubble around your aircraft, the imaginary bubble, of course, is exclusive to one target. So if you have 10 targets around you, it is monitoring 10 of these TA and RA bubbles at the same time. This is something that the books find a little difficult to disseminate. I don't blame the books. It is extremely difficult to explain in writing, but that's what your TCAS is doing. Your TCAS is monitoring multiple targets around your aircraft, multiple intruders around your aircraft constantly, and creating multiple TA and RA bubbles around your aircraft constantly, each for one aircraft pair. Your aircraft, intruder one, your aircraft, intruder two, your aircraft, intruder three, and so on and so forth, right? So it's amply clear, I hope, that the bubbles around your aircraft, the traffic advisory and the resolution advisory regions around your aircraft are not distance related, they are time related. You might want to think about it for a moment. Why? Why are they not distance related? Why couldn't we just keep it simple and say my aircraft has one traffic advisory bubble around it, one resolution advisory bubble around it, and it is distance related, not time related? Just place the traffic advisory bubble at 5 nautical miles and place the resolution advisory bubble at 1 nautical mile. The reason why it is not standardized to distance, guys, is because if you take speed out of the equation and you make the TA and RA regions purely about distance, if I am flying a Boeing 737 and the intruder aircraft is a Cessna 172, he will take a lot more time to reach me, assuming my TA bubble is 5 nautical miles. He will take a lot more time to reach me as opposed to maybe a MiG 21 who will reach me in just a couple of seconds. We have to standardize the reaction time. We have to standardize the reaction time for pilots to be able to react to any intruder, any aircraft type within the same amount of time. Which is why, whether it is a TA bubble or an RA bubble, the constant is time and distance changes depending on the type of intruder that is approaching you. I hope this is clear. If it is not, please drop me a message and we will discuss this during our one-on-one online meetings. The next slide is the same slide with your TCAS indications. And let us now talk about the various indications that your TCAS display will show you. Your TCAS display will depict your targets as. So guys, we will start from the least threatening indication to the most threatening indication. And remember, guys, as we go forward, as you learn more and more about TCAS, and as you study more and more about TCAS, as you start using TCAS in the commercial airlines, you will need to remember these indications by memory because they will help you and help reduce the startle effect when you're actually in a TCAS event, God forbid. So let us talk about the least threatening target on your TCAS displays, which is a solid or a hollow diamond, which could either be blue, I believe the official name of the color is cyan, C-Y-A-N, or white. Depending on the kind of hardware your aircraft is using, it could be white or blue. These indications are exactly the same. A solid blue diamond is the same as a solid white diamond, and a hollow blue diamond is the same as a hollow white diamond. What is a hollow blue or a hollow white diamond? This is simply proximate traffic. Depending on the hardware type of both your aircraft, your TCAS will have a certain effective range. And within that certain effective range, it will be able to show you proximate traffic around your aircraft, which is not really of a threatening nature. So the least threatening target is a hollow white diamond or a hollow blue diamond, which is simply traffic in your vicinity. A hollow blue diamond or a hollow white diamond may change into a solid blue diamond or a solid white diamond on your TCAS display. When does this happen? This happens when the intruder traffic is within 6 nautical miles of you laterally and within 1,200 feet above or below you. Remember, guys, both these conditions need to be met. The aircraft needs to be within 6 nautical miles of you laterally and within 1,200 feet above or below you. When that happens, that intruder traffic will turn into a solid diamond from a hollow diamond, right? But whether it is a solid diamond, blue or white, or a hollow diamond, blue or white, this is simply traffic information, simply proximate traffic in your vicinity, right? There is no threat whatsoever. Let us say this traffic continues to fly towards you and gets into a place where TCAS senses that in the next, let's say, 40 seconds, you could potentially collide with this aircraft, which means this traffic has now entered your TA region. When this traffic enters your TA region, TCAS will give you two alerts, an oral alert and a visual alert. As part of the oral alert, the aircraft will speak traffic 2 times. At the same time, the solid diamond on your TCAS display will change into a solid yellow circle. This is an indication, an alert to the pilots that this is a traffic advisory. Be careful, it could potentially change into a resolution advisory. What we are to do With this traffic advisory, we will speak about in the standard operating procedure section of our presentation, which is a little later. But for the moment, I just want you guys to remember that as part of a traffic advisory, your aircraft will orally warn you traffic, traffic 2 times, and your solid diamond will turn into a solid yellow circle on your TCAS display. Let us say no heed is paid to this alert and the aircraft continues, the intruder continues to fly towards your aircraft and now enters your RA, resolution advisory region. Your solid yellow circle will turn into a solid red square on your TCAS display, and your aircraft once again will speak, and this time will speak the resolution advisory suggestion: climb, climb, descend, descend, level off, level off. It will give you some kind of an instruction that will attempt to create vertical separation between you and the intruder that is proximate to your aircraft, which has caused the resolution advisory. I hope this is clear. We will talk about the specific actions pertaining to how these resolution advisories are dealt with in the SOP section towards the end of our presentation. For the moment, I just need you to understand what the indications are. So the indications are a hollow diamond, white or blue, a solid diamond, white or blue, a solid yellow circle, and a solid red square. Right? Let us proceed to the next slide, guys. For this slide, we're going to have to exit the presentation mode because I need to move these pictures around to explain to you the indications. So this is a depiction of an instrument, a vertical speed indicator, that incorporates a TCAS display within it. I like using this for the purposes of this presentation because it's an easy instrument to understand. It's an easy instrument to read. And also this is a kind of TCAS display that I had used on the first commercial airplane that I flew, which was the ATR 72-500. It was a previous generation commercial airplane, which was not a full glass cockpit, but it had this kind of a TCAS display, which was very easy to read. So it was basically incorporated with the vertical speed indicator. And this would be a good time to tell you that no matter what airplane you fly, guys, no matter what type of airplane you fly, what generation of airplane you fly, if it has a TCAS 2 in it, it will incorporate your traffic information or your indications or your targets as part of some kind of a navigation display, which will depict your airplane with respect to the other targets or the other airplanes in your vicinity. Just like this, your airplane, and it will have some kind of an area to depict other targets or intruders around your aircraft. So this instrument is a vertical speed indicator. It has a vertical speed indicator scale. It has a needle, and it has your aircraft in the backdrop. This is an LCD, a black LCD display. It has your aircraft in the backdrop, and it has some targets around your aircraft. It has some targets around your aircraft. If the going is good and you are flying your airplane and the targets are at bay, there is no threat per se. This is what the instrument will look like. Your aircraft and some other aircraft around you. However, if the target tends to become a threat, tends to become a resolution advisory, your vertical speed indicator will light up into red and green, and we will talk about how that works right now. Let us continue to look at our aircraft. I'm going to delete this graphic, and let us continue to look at our aircraft in the middle of the screen. That's your aircraft. And these are aircraft around your aircraft in your vicinity. You will see that there is a 6 nm written on the top right of the instrument, which indicates that the range of this instrument is 6 nautical miles. Because I have used this kind of instrument before, I can tell you that this instrument has got a small toggle button on the bottom right-hand side of it, which if you press once, it toggles between 6 nautical miles and 12 nautical miles, 6 nautical miles and 12 nautical miles range. So for the moment, it is set to 6 nautical miles. That means this circle is 6 nautical miles and your airplane is in the middle of it. All of these targets are within 6 nautical miles of your aircraft position. So let us start discussing these targets and the indications of these targets from the least threatening to the most threatening. what is the least threatening target on screen? If this is your aircraft, the least threatening target is a hollow diamond. A hollow diamond. That hollow diamond is accompanied by additional symbology plus 1/8. What does that mean? It means this hollow diamond traffic within your vicinity, is 1,800 feet above you. And of course, you can gauge his relative position with respect to you. He's about 11 o'clock your position, 10, 11 o'clock your position, in front of you, 1,800 feet above you. Guys, I want you to remember, in the previous slide, we had discussed that a hollow diamond turns into a solid diamond when that particular traffic is within 6 nautical miles of you and 1,200 feet above or below you. Now, this hollow diamond, Mr. Plus 1/8, is within 6 nautical miles of you. We know that because we know that the range of this instrument is 6 nautical miles right now. But he is not 1,200 feet above or below you. He is 1,800 feet above you, which is why this hollow diamond has not turned into a solid diamond, which takes us to our next target, -10. Solid diamond, -10. Solid diamond, -10 she is roughly 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock your position. We know she is within 6 nautical miles of you because the range of this instrument is 6 nautical miles. And because she is 1,000 feet below you, -10, 1,000 feet below you, she is a solid diamond because both the conditions to turn her into a solid diamond are being met. Within 6 nautical miles of you and within 1,200 feet above or below you. There is additional symbology on this target, though. This target has a downward pointing arrow beside the diamond. What does that mean? Every time you see a downward or an upward facing arrow beside the symbol, the TCAS symbol, what that means is that that target is climbing or descending with a minimum vertical speed of 500 feet per minute. Important to remember, if the target is climbing or descending with a vertical speed of less than 500 feet per minute, you will not see that upward or downward pointing arrow, right? Which takes us to the next target, -02, solid circle with a downward pointing arrow. This solid yellow circle is a traffic advisory traffic, which means if you have this kind of a traffic on your TCAS display, your airplane in the recent past would have spoken traffic to alert you that there is a traffic advisory on your TCAS display. Captain, please look at the TCAS display and figure out where this traffic is, right? And of course, this solid yellow circle is -02, which means she is 200 feet below you and descending with a vertical speed of more than 500 feet per minute, right? Which takes us to our most threatening target, which is red solid square, -02. This target is roughly 3 o'clock your position, and this is a resolution advisory target. And this target is the reason your TCAS has turned your vertical speed indicator red and green. Doesn't matter what kind of aircraft you're flying, what type of aircraft you're flying, if your TCAS gets into a resolution advisory situation, your vertical speed indicator will turn red and green, telling you that, Captain, you must place your vertical speed indicator needle in the green zone. What that means is, as a result of this resolution advisory, your aircraft would have given you a resolution advisory instruction suggestion. That resolution advisory instruction would have been climb, because my vertical speed indicator is commanding me to put my vertical speed indicator needle between 1,500 feet per minute of climb and 2,000 feet per minute of climb, which means it is asking my aircraft to climb. And if my guess is right, it is probably asking -02 to descend, or level off, depending on what TCAS thinks is the safest way out of this resolution advisory. I hope this is clear. Just to recap, least threatening target on screen, hollow diamond, +18, roughly 11 o'clock our position, 1800 feet above us. The next target is solid diamond, -10, 1000 feet below us, descending with a vertical speed of 500 feet per minute or more. Solid yellow circle, target 200 feet below us, descending with a vertical speed of 500 feet per minute or more. And the most threatening target is red solid square, 200 feet below us, is the reason why the vertical speed indicator has turned all kinds of colors, asking us, prompting us to place our vertical speed indicator needle between 1500 and 2000, which means TCAS is asking your aircraft to climb as part of the resolution advisory. I hope this is clear, captains. Different representations. I've shown you the slide before as part of our discussion over the last 5 to 10 minutes. But basically, what the slide means to tell you is that different aircraft, different representations, different kind of hardware. But remember, the TCAS indications in terms of your traffic indications and the entire concept of your TCAS turning your vertical speed indicator red and green to tell you where to place your vertical speed indicator needle as part of the resolution advisory, climb, descend, level off, remains the same in all aircraft everywhere in the world that are equipped with a TCAS 2. I hope this explanation has been satisfactory, and this would be a very good time to take a natural break because we've reached a situation where we have discussed too much of information. So if you want to break here, you can break here and do the remainder of the presentation maybe a day later so that you can grasp the content better. I will continue speaking, but in the event that you want to break here, this will be the end of class 1, and we will do class 2 tomorrow or whenever you want to revisit and come back for class 2. We will be beginning class 2 with controls of TCAS, basically talking about various control panels and how to control those control panels and how to interact with the software of your TCAS with the hardware of your aircraft. So guys, for all of you who are leaving, thank you for your time today, and we will discuss the remainder of TCAS the next time you come back for part 2 of the class. Student pilots, senior student pilots, new CPL holders, captains and first officers from the airlines, and transitioning military pilots who are part of this airline orientation course. Welcome back to part 2 of TCAS. I hope you've had a pleasant break. What we will discuss in part 2 of this briefing will be standard operating procedures, contingencies, and some questions and answers that will be useful for all of you transitioning to the airlines or starting your first type rating. So let us quickly skip ahead to the slide that we stopped at during class 1, part 1 of this TCAS briefing. We were last on the indications. We spoke about the indications. We talked about different representations, and we were going to discuss controls, SOPs, and contingencies. So, captains, as we discussed in part 1 of this briefing, your transponder is very, very closely related to your TCAS. Your TCAS is hardware and software that is capable of sensing transponder signals from other airplanes in your vicinity, thereby giving your TCAS the ability to be able to establish the intruder or the other aircraft's position with respect to your aircraft relative to your aircraft, and put those indications on a screen on a navigation display so you can know where that traffic is around you. So quite obviously, the controls of the TCAS would also be very close to your transponder controls. In fact, the controls of your TCAS are built into your transponder control panel. So here I have two examples of very generic transponder control panels in your cockpit. There is nothing specific about this. You are obviously flying different kinds of aircraft, or you will be flying different types of aircraft. This is simply to understand how TCAS is controlled from the cockpit. Your aircraft type will have its own control panel, but largely speaking, the controls will be very similar. So as an example, let's look at these two transponder control panels. You will notice each of these transponder control panels has got 4 digits, which is basically the squawk code that you have entered for this flight. This squawk code can be entered using these knobs. Of course, talking about the squawk code and the 4 digits, this is related to your transponder. XPDR 1 and 2 is selection of transponder 1 and 2. Some of these large aircraft, Boeing 737s, Airbus A320s, ATR 72s, have 2 transponders, right? Depending on your company SOPs, you may end up using one transponder on an odd day, the other transponder on an even day, but basically it is a single control panel controlling two different transponders. This is purely for equipment backup so that you have a backup to the primary transponder. Now, let's talk about this knob over here, which is how you control your TCAS or your Traffic Collision Avoidance System. Let's talk about the positions on this switch. The positions are test, standby, off, XPDR or transponder, TA only, that is traffic advisory only, and TARA, traffic advisory / resolution advisory. Let me discuss these positions with you one by one. Typically, the test position of this knob would test your TCAS equipment. On most modern aircraft, when you move this switch into the test position, the aircraft will automatically cycle through all the TCAS commands, voice commands, for example, climb, climb, descend, descend, traffic, traffic. It will cycle through all of these oral commands, and you will be able to hear the computer cycling through all these oral commands, and just to test if the system is working correctly. Standby is, of course, the transponder is on standby, but not off. Transponder is switching this equipment, that is this control panel, requesting the transponder to emit your position and emit your squawk code, but not switching on the TCAS. The TCAS is off in the transponder position. When this switch is in the TARA position, that is the normal position that this switch will find itself in during a normal line flight. What the TARA position does is switches on your TCAS entirely, completely, and your transponder is on as well. So your transponder and TCAS both on at the same time, wherein your transponder is emitting your position and your squawk code, and your TCAS is allowing other aircraft to be able to capture your transponder signals. Thereby, other aircraft can see your aircraft on their navigation display. There is another position here called TA only. We will talk about this switch position in our contingencies section. But for the moment, all I want to tell you about this position is this position, TA only, switches on your transponder, switches on your TCAS. However, your TCAS is switched on in traffic advisory mode only, which means, if you remember what we discussed in part 1 of our TCAS briefing, you will be able to get a traffic advisory, traffic, remember, on your navigation display. However, in the event that you continue to close the gap between the intruder aircraft and you, and TCAS senses that there is a risk of collision, you will not get a resolution advisory if your switch is in the TA only position. Why this switch finds itself in the TA only position, I will discuss with you in the contingency section of this briefing, which is a few slides down. I hope the positions are extremely clear, and we can move to the next slide. This slide talks about a little bit of philosophy, TCAS philosophy. When you have a TCAS display, like the one we discussed in part 1 of the briefing, the one that you see on screen, you have your aircraft position and you have targets relative to your aircraft position. Those targets are represented by a certain symbol, could be a hollow diamond, could be a solid diamond, blue or white, could be a solid yellow circle, could be a solid red square, depending on the kind of target it is. What is the least reliable information you would get out of this target on your navigation display? What is the least reliable information? Captains, the least reliable information you will get is bearing information. So if I were to look at this target right now and analyze, this target has a +10, which means this target is 1,000 feet above me. This target is within 6 nautical miles of me. And this target has an upward pointing arrow placed beside it, which means this target is climbing with a vertical speed of 500 feet per minute or more. This is information I get from the symbology that I know of. However, if I were to tell you, or rather if I were to ask you, where is this target with respect to my aircraft? By looking at this, you would ascertain that this target is approximately 2 o'clock your position. Agreed? It's to my right, in front of me. This is the least reliable information that TCAS gives you. You can never trust bearing information that TCAS gives you. Even though the target is being shown at 2 o'clock, it may be 1 o'clock, it may be 3 o'clock. Sometimes the bearing information is wildly unreliable, but the vertical information, the information in the symbols are fairly accurate. So The moral of the story of this slide is do not trust bearing information that TCAS gives you. Hence, we must never get creative with a TCAS indication and start turning the aircraft left or right to try to avoid a traffic that is shown on your TCAS display, a target that is shown on your TCAS display. Always follow TCAS guidance. If you, God forbid, find yourself in a situation, in an RA situation, always follow RA guidance in the vertical sense, up, down, climb, descend, and that's it. There is no left-right correction when it comes to TCAS. And why am I telling you this? The reason I'm telling you this is, Captain, sometimes when you are flying commercial aircraft, you may end up being faced with a target that looks like this. Let me orient you. This is your aircraft. This is your TCAS display. And the target is right in front of you. And the target is a solid blue cyan diamond with nothing else mentioned beside it. No number, no arrow, no nothing. Let me give you a moment to think about this. I'll give you about 5 to 10 seconds to think about this. What do you make of this target? Is there a risk associated with this target? Is there something wrong? Yes, there is something wrong. This target is a solid blue diamond. Looks like it is right in front of you, maybe about 5 or 6 miles in front of you. And it is displaying no altitude information, and it is displaying no trend information in terms of whether it is climbing or descending by way of the arrow, the upward or downward pointing arrow. So the biggest risk with this target is, I don't know where this target is with respect to me in the vertical. I don't know if this target is at my altitude, above me, or below me. But this target is a solid diamond. So maybe this target is within 6 nautical miles of me, and maybe this target is within 1,200 feet above or below me, but I don't know where this target is. Captains, you would typically receive a target like this when an airplane is emitting a transponder signal using a mode alpha transponder. Remember, we discussed mode alpha transponders in part 1 of this briefing. Mode alpha, Charlie and Sierra. A mode alpha transponder is a transponder that only emits bearing and range information. I am in this direction, so far away from you, but it has no mode Charlie information. A mode Charlie transponder gives you altitude as well. So because this particular target is not using a mode Charlie transponder, you don't have altitude information about this target. There is a small chance that this kind of a target is an airplane. Out of experience, I will tell you that you are faced with targets like this very often on the Indian east and west coast. These targets are very, very common on the east and west coasts of India. When you're flying into airports like Bombay, flying into airports like Cochin, flying into airports like Visakhapatnam, Vizag, you will find targets of this kind. And out of experience, I will tell you that these targets are almost certainly always one of 3 things. Almost always one of 3 things. What are these 3 things? This target could either be helicopter traffic, this target could either be a fighter aircraft, or this target, when I say fighter aircraft, I mean an Air Force aircraft, or this target could be a false return coming back from one of the ships that is used to supply an oil rig on the coast of India, or the oil rig itself. Sometimes these ships and these oil rigs have radars that emit signals that our TCASs falsely capture as a target on our screens. Let me explain to you how to deal with what we call a negative mode Charlie target. Every time you see a target like this, you will hear a lot of aviators in India calling ATC and asking them, Radar, I have a target on my TCAS negative mode Charlie. What that means is I have a TCAS target. He is not emitting mode Charlie information, which means he's not emitting altitude information, and I don't know where he is with respect to me. So let me tell you what to do in a situation like this. In a situation like this, a pilot must do 2 things very quickly. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you observe a negative mode Charlie target on your TCAS display, immediately look out to try to spot the target if you can, if he or she is fairly close to you. And secondly, always call ATC and inform ATC that you have a negative mode Charlie target in front of you or close to your aircraft. Captains, you will notice that ATC will always respond to this call by saying this target is one of three things, what I just told you. This target is either helicopter traffic, or it is a military aircraft, or it is a false return from an oil rig or an offshore vessel that is supplying an oil rig. ATC, in most cases in India, will be aware of what this target is. That is the reason I briefed you on this slide, because if you ever find yourself in a situation where you are faced with a negative mode Charlie target, please do not start turning the aircraft left and right to try to avoid that target, because bearing information coming from your TCAS display is extremely, extremely unreliable. I hope I've made myself extremely clear on the unreliability of bearing information coming from your TCAS display. Of course, if you happen to look out and spot the target and the target is right in front of you, God forbid, yes, please take evasive action by turning or doing whatever you need to do. But in the event that you can't see him or her, please do not turn the aircraft left or right to try to avoid this target. And we finally get to my favorite part of this briefing, which is standard operating procedures. Captains, there are many pilots in the world who study TCAS, understand TCAS, understand the technicality of TCAS, and understand the symbology, as we have already discussed in part one of this briefing. However, when a pilot is placed for the first time in a commercial cockpit, and for example, this could be as part of your type rating, or this could be as part of your line training, and you are faced with a TCAS event the first time in your life, most pilots are unable to deal with the situation because they don't have a rough framework of sequence of events in their mind. How do the sequence of events go once I receive a traffic advisory, a resolution advisory? How do I deal with the situation? Now, your type ratings, whether you type rate yourself on a 320 or a 737 or an ATR, your type rating will give you specific procedures to deal with a TCAS event. However, the SOP section of this briefing will help you reduce the startle effect during your type rating, wherein you will be able to make more sense of the actions that your aircraft type suggests. So let us build a scenario. You and your first officer, or you and your captain, are sitting in cruise at, let's say you're an ATR pilot, and you're sitting in cruise at 18,000 feet, flight level 180. In cruise, the autopilot is engaged. The workload is relatively low. One of you is going through your arrival charts on your iPad, and the other one is sipping a hot cup of coffee. And everything is hunky-dory. Things are going fine. And all of a sudden, your aircraft speaks traffic, traffic. So far, your TCAS display has been completely blank. There's been a target here and a target there in terms of a hollow diamond or a solid diamond, but nothing more than that. So you're sitting in cruise, one of you sipping hot coffee, the other one is tinkering around with his iPad trying to figure out the arrival charts for the next station. And you hear traffic, traffic. Captains, no startle, no surprise. A person who has a hot cup of coffee in his or her hand, please store the coffee in the mug holder. Please put your iPad aside. Pilot flying, whoever is flying the airplane at this point, place your hands on the control column. And it is important for the pilot flying to speak traffic on TCAS. When the pilot flying speaks traffic on TCAS, both pilots are prompted to look at the TCAS navigation display to try to figure out where this traffic advisory traffic is. One of the targets on your TCAS navigation display would have turned a solid yellow circle indicating a traffic advisory traffic. Remember, a traffic advisory is a traffic advisory. It is something that you must look out for on your TCAS display, but you don't need to take any actions because it has not turned into a resolution advisory yet. It may not turn into a resolution advisory. It may remain a traffic advisory target for a few seconds and then become a solid diamond or a hollow diamond, right? But we must still be cognizant of the fact that a traffic advisory has been received and you must look at your navigation display. So actions are pilot flying and pilot monitoring, put away whatever you're doing. Pilot flying puts his or her hands on the control column, leave the autopilot engaged, don't disengage the autopilot, and the pilot flying must speak traffic on TCAS so that both pilots look at their TCAS navigation displays to figure out where this traffic is. There could be a situation where a few seconds later, this traffic advisory turns into a resolution advisory, and your aircraft may speak something like climb, climb, or descend, descend. You are now in a TCAS resolution advisory, and you must comply with the TCAS resolution advisory. And remember, because your airplane has put you into a resolution advisory, that TCAS target that was earlier a solid yellow circle has now turned into a solid red square, and your vertical speed indicator has lit up like a Christmas tree. Your job is to now place your vertical speed indicator needle in the green band, thereby complying with the resolution advisory. As we can see on screen, the resolution advisory in this case is climb, climb. Remember, what is the state of the cockpit at this point? The pilot flying already has his hands on the control column as part of the traffic advisory, but he or she has not yet disengaged the autopilot. So here are the actions the pilot flying will do now. You, as pilot flying, will now disengage the autopilot, comply with the RA by pulling on the control column and bringing your vertical speed indicator needle into the green band, whilst speaking TCAS, I have controls. So I say again, pilot flying will speak TCAS, I have controls, disengage the autopilot using the quick disconnect button on the control column, and comply with the RA. That means pull or push on the control column depending on the resolution advisory that you have received. You are in the RA as long as your vertical speed indicator is lit up like a Christmas tree. You may now receive further instructions as part of this RA, resolution advisory. You may, for example, receive an instruction saying level off, level off. And you will notice, as part of level off, your vertical speed indicator green band has moved close to zero, thereby telling you to, Captain, bring your vertical speed indicator needle to zero. That means level off the aircraft. Captains, please remember, level off is not the end of the resolution advisory. A level off could turn into a climb, climb again, could turn into a descend, descend again. You are not done with the TCAS resolution advisory till your aircraft says clear of conflict. And once your aircraft says clear of conflict, your vertical speed indicator will go back to normal. Once the TCAS says clear of conflict and you are done with the resolution advisory, the pilot flying of the aircraft has a couple of jobs to do. Those jobs are re-engage the autopilot, go back to the level that you came from. Remember, as part of the TCAS resolution advisory, you were flying at 18,000 feet, flight level 180. That was your cleared flight level by ATC. And in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the traffic advisory turning into a resolution advisory, you have abruptly departed your flight level and descended or climbed. Your job now is to go back to your cleared level. So as soon as you hear clear of conflict, the pilot flying of the aircraft will re-engage the autopilot, go back to the level that you've come from, and now speak to ATC and tell them, hello, ATC, I just had a TCAS resolution advisory at so-and-so level, so many miles away from so-and-so VOR, and I need details of the other aircraft because I need to file a report when I land. These are the rough basic SOPs I have prepared for the purposes of this airline orientation course. The next slide will summarize these SOPs. Let's talk about them once again. Try to revise these SOPs before you start your airline line training or before you go for your first type rating, because it will really help you create a certain concept in your head. Like I said, captains, there are a lot of pilots who understand TCAS. There are a lot of pilots who know the technicality. But when you are put in the seat and when you are finally given your first TCAS event, you don't have a framework in your mind of how to deal with this event. This basic SOP gives you a little bit of a framework to prepare you for your first TCAS, traffic advisory, and resolution advisory events. So let's talk about the procedure once again. Captains, you're sitting in the cockpit. One of you is having coffee. The other one is on the iPad. The airplane is on autopilot. Everything is under control. You are monitoring. It's flying well. And it's doing what it's supposed to do. All of a sudden, you hear traffic, traffic. Remember, this is a traffic advisory. Pilot flying puts his or her hand on the control column, speaks traffic on TCAS. So both the pilots look at the TCAS display, anticipating an RA might happen. Do not disconnect the autopilot. So hands on the control column, Do not disconnect the autopilot. Anticipate an RA. An RA might come. If it turns into an RA and the aircraft says, climb, climb, pilot flying already has his or her hands on the control column, will speak TCAS. I have controls. Disconnect the autopilot. Comply with the resolution advisory. Climb or descent. Put your vertical speed indicator needle in the green band. Very soon, it may turn into level off, level off. It may turn into another climb, climb, or a descent, descent. But as soon as you hear the words clear of conflict, your job is to re-engage the autopilot, go back to the flight level that you came from, inform ATC. This is the rough SOP that we will take away from this airline orientation briefing on TCAS. I hope it's extremely clear. Once again, if you have any doubts, drop me a message on the LMS or drop me an email and we will talk about it when we meet during our one-on-one online meetings. This would be a good time to take you to this slide. And I'll come back to the other slides in a while. Why version 7 of TCAS 2, software version 7 of TCAS 2, was changed to version 7.1. Now that we've talked about climb, climb, and descend, descend, we have a better understanding of TCAS RA callouts. And now we can talk about, look at point number 3 on the slide, the Uberlingen disaster. Remember, on the first slide of this presentation, on the title slide of this presentation, I referred to something called the Uberlingen disaster, which prompted us to change from software version 7 to 7.1. The reason why that happened is because the Uberlingen disaster was a mid-air collision that happened between two aircraft, I believe somewhere over Europe. What had happened is two aircraft, both having TCASs, were given a resolution advisory. One was asked to climb and the other was asked to descend. Unfortunately, both of them ended up doing the same thing. One of them disregarded the resolution advisory instruction. For example, was given a climb but opted to descend. As a result of this, both the aircraft were doing the same thing. However, TCAS software version 7, TCAS 2 software version 7 was unable to update the resolution advisory instruction in case one of the pilots was making a mistake. With the software version 7.1, TCAS is now able to constantly monitor what both the pilots are doing. And in the event that one of the airplanes is making a mistake, for example, supposing they have two aircraft, one has been asked to climb, the other has been asked to descend. And unfortunately, the pilot who's asked to climb opts to descend for some reason, and both of them find themselves descending. TCAS now has the ability to give the other aircraft a reversal instruction and say, no, climb, climb now. So TCAS 2 version 7.1 has the ability to give you a reversal of resolution advisory instruction, which was not the case in TCAS 2 software version 7. That is why we changed from version 7 to version 7.1, and that is what the Uberlingen disaster is. I hope this is extremely clear. When would it be a bad idea to use TCAS? This is part of contingencies, guys, right? When would it be a bad idea to use your TCAS? It's not always a good idea to use TCAS guidance. Sometimes there are some exceptions where TCAS guidance must not be used. Let's talk about those exceptions. When you have a mode alpha only return, we've already discussed this. You're flying and you see a solid diamond right in front of you or somewhere close to you. Within 6 nautical miles, of course, since it's a solid diamond, within 1,200 feet above or below you, but no mode Charlie information. It's a bad idea to start using this TCAS indication. It is a better idea to speak to ATC. It is a better idea to look out to try to spot this traffic visually. Point number 2 is a little bit of an oxymoron. Close to the ground, most modern TCASs automatically go into traffic advisory only mode once you come close to the ground. For example, my aircraft, when you cross 1,200 feet AGL and you go below 1,200 feet AGL, it automatically takes your TCAS and puts it into TA only mode, traffic advisory only mode. Why does it do this? Because it's a bad idea to start giving a descend resolution advisory, a descend resolution advisory to an aircraft that's very close to the ground. So to avoid confusion, most modern TCASs send an aircraft into traffic advisory only mode when it gets close to the ground. So it is a bad idea to follow TCAS guidance when you're very close to the ground. Most modern aircraft already have that fail-safe feature built into them wherein they are put into traffic advisory mode once they come close to the ground. The next point is when your transponder is inoperative. If your transponder is inoperative, your TCAS has failed anyway. So your TCAS won't work if your transponder is inoperative. But I have to brief you on this, so it's important to mention. If your transponder is inoperative, your TCAS will not work. It's a bad idea to be using your TCAS at that point. Most large modern jetliners and turboprops follow an abnormal checklist for anything that goes wrong on your aircraft. So you have a bunch of abnormal and emergency checklists, and these checklists are to be referred to as and when you have technical issues in the aircraft whilst you're flying the aircraft. Some of these checklists that you do will direct you to set your TCAS intentionally to traffic advisory mode only. Remember, we talked about it on the control panels. This switch over here. Some of your checklists will ask you to intentionally move your TCAS into the traffic advisory only mode. What could these checklists be? These checklists could be a single engine operation checklist. Remember, if you are flying a multi engine aircraft, that's a twin engine jet or a twin engine turboprop, and you lose one of your engine, you will do a myriad of checklists to set up your aircraft for single engine operation. However, once you're done with those checklists, your aircraft has got limited climb performance. And your aircraft is not the best suited candidate to deal with a resolution advisory. You don't want to climb, and descend with a single engine. So somewhere in those checklists that you have done to set up your aircraft for single engine operation, you would have moved your TCAS to traffic advisory only mode. If you are ever doing an abnormal checklist as a response to some kind of a control surface related problem or a hydraulic problem which leads your main control surfaces to not function that well, your ailerons, your elevator, most of these checklists will ask you to set your TCAS to TA only because, once again, with a control surface problem, you don't want to be climbing, and descending, right? Very closely related to this point is something fly-by-wire related. Supposing you're flying a modern jetliner like an Airbus and you have some kind of a fly-by-wire related issue, there is a good chance that those checklists will ask you to set your TCAS to TA only, traffic advisory only. Don't quote me on this. I'm not Airbus A320 rated, but it's fairly obvious that if you have some kind of a fly-by-wire related issue which leads to trouble with your control surfaces, you will lose the ability to rapidly climb and descend or accurately climb and descend. And the last 2 points are wind shear and stall. Captains, wind shear and stall are events that take precedence over a TCAS event. So in the event that you're at wind shear, you will follow your standard wind shear escape maneuver, even at the cost of disregarding a TCAS resolution advisory, because the more important thing to do at this point is to maintain flight, maintain lift, and save everybody's life on the aircraft. So you will disregard a TCAS resolution advisory in the event that you are in severe wind shear and have applied your wind shear escape maneuver to get yourself out of this problem. Similarly, a stall. If you are in a stall, you will prioritize flying the aircraft and disregard a TCAS resolution advisory instruction. Captains, remember, a resolution advisory applies to both the aircraft, you and the intruder. In the event that you do not follow your resolution advisory because you are in bigger trouble than that resolution advisory itself, for example, wind shear or stall, remember the other aircraft will be given a resolution advisory as well. And remember that other aircraft, as part of TCAS 2 version 7.1, may be given a resolution advisory reversal as well. So you are fairly safe even if you don't follow your TCAS resolution advisory instructions in the event that you have bigger issues to deal with, like wind shear or stall. I hope we're all clear with the contingencies, with the standard operating procedures, and when it is a bad idea to use your TCAS. And now I want to skip to 2 questions that I'm going to ask you to answer as part of this exercise. It will help you with interviews, it will help you with your type reading briefings, just to keep it interactive and to see that you've understood what we have discussed. So, what is the answer to this question, captains? What is the difference between TCAS 1 and TCAS 2? Alpha is TCAS 1 offered only mode alpha, whereas TCAS 2 offers mode alpha and Charlie. Bravo is TCAS 1 offered only traffic advisory, whereas TCAS 2 offers traffic advisory and resolution advisory. Option Charlie is TCAS is optional, whereas TCAS 2 is mandatory. For all of you who answered Bravo, the answer is correct. Bravo is the correct answer. TCAS 1 offers only TA, offered only TA, whereas TCAS 2 offers traffic advisory and resolution advisory both. Okay. What is the least accurate information you get from the TCAS display? For all of you who answered Alpha, The answer is correct. Bearing information is the least reliable information you get on a TCAS display. Remember, guys, every time you think of bearing information on a TCAS display, always remember my example of the solid blue diamond on your TCAS display, whereas you have wherein you have nothing else but the solid blue diamond, no altitude information, no climb trend or descent trend. Bearing information is the least reliable information. You do not want to be turning left or right in response to that kind of a TCAS indication. And that is the end of our TCAS briefing as part of this airline orientation course, captains. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you have taken away something from it. And if there are any doubts, please drop me a message on the LMS or drop me an email. We will talk about it during our one-on-one online meetings. Thank you for your time. I will see you in a different module. Wish you safe skies and safer landings. Have a nice day.